There is a specific sound a billion-dollar company makes when it stops breathing. It isn't a scream. It's a silence. They fired me at 9 a.m. because they thought I was too old to fight back. They thought they could steal my life's work and push me out the door. But by 5 p.m., when every screen in the building went black, they realized their mistake. I didn't just build the system. I was the system. And I was the only one holding the keys. The air on the 42nd floor always tasted the same. Recycled oxygen, static electricity, and the metallic tang of ambition. To anyone else, the server room was just a cold, windowless box of blinking lights and spinning fans. But to me it was the only honest place in the entire building. I stood there watching the data streams cascade down the monitors. My life's work. The Elias Protocol, they called it. A living, breathing nervous system that kept this company alive, while the executives upstairs drank scotch and patted each other on the back. They didn't understand the code. They only understood the profit it generated. A soft pause. The sound of a heavy door sealing shut. The door behind me clicked. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The frantic energy of the hallway died instantly, replaced by a soft, rhythmic footsteps. 2 o'clock, a voice said. Soft. Amused. I turned. Maya. She was standing in the doorway balancing 2 ceramic mugs. She looked vivid. That was the only word for it. In a building of gray suits and gray walls, Maya was a splash of color. She was wearing that oversized coat she liked, the one that smelled faintly of rain and vanilla, and her hair was pulled back in a messy clip, a few dark strands escaping to frame her face. She was 24, half a lifetime younger than me. She had joined the team 6 months ago as a junior analyst, bright-eyed and terrified. Now she was the only person in this company I trusted to watch my back. You're staring, Elias, she whispered, walking over to my desk. I'm thinking, I corrected, though we both knew I was lying. She set the mug down near my hand. The ceramic made a sharp clink against the glass surface. Black coffee. No sugar. Just the way I took it when I needed to think clearly. The board is meeting upstairs, she said, her voice dropping to a hush, barely louder than the hum of the servers. She leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing her ankles. She was close enough that I could feel the radiant warmth coming off her. They've been in there for 3 hours. People are talking. I looked up at her. She wasn't looking at the screens. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, dark, and filled with a worry she was trying hard to hide. She wasn't worried about her job. She was worried about me. Let them talk, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. I reached for the coffee, my hand brushing within an inch of her arm. I let it hover there for a split second, just long enough to feel the ghost of a touch, before pulling back. The system runs itself, Maya. As long as the lights are on, we're fine. She shifted, leaning in closer. The smell of rain was stronger now, cutting through the sterile ozone. It's not the system I'm worried about, Elias. For a moment, the 42nd floor didn't exist. The looming firing, the betrayal I knew was coming. The corporate shark circling above us. It all faded. There was just the low hum of the drives, the steam rising from the coffee, and the way she looked at me, like I was something worth saving. I wanted to tell her to leave, to run, to get as far away from me as possible before the axe fell. A man my age should know better than to drag a bright young star into his orbit just as it's about to collapse. But I didn't. I just took a sip of the coffee, met her gaze, and let myself drown in the quiet for just a few seconds longer. Get back to your desk, kid, I murmured softer this time. Before they notice you're missing. She hesitated, her fingers trailing off the edge of my desk as she stood up. I'm not going anywhere, Elias. She left the room, but the warmth of her stayed. And as I turned back to the glowing screens, I knew 2 things for certain. First, they were going to fire me today. And second, I wasn't going to let them touch her. The boardroom was a theater of glass and mahogany, designed to make you feel small. But I didn't feel small. As I sat at the end of the long table, watching the CEO slide a thick manila envelope toward me, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. It's a restructuring, Elias, Sterling said, refusing to look me in the eye. He was focused on the cufflink he was twisting nervously at his wrist. The board feels we need fresh eyes on the infrastructure. Younger eyes. They didn't want fresh eyes. They wanted my code without my salary. They wanted the engine without the mechanic. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my security badge, and placed it on the table. It made a dry final slap against the wood. "Good luck, Sterling," I said quietly. "You're going to need it." I stood up and walked out. The silence behind me was heavy, but the noise outside the glass doors was deafening. Maya was there. She was standing by the reception desk, clutching a stack of files to her chest like a shield. Her face was pale. She had seen me hand over the badge through the glass walls. She knew. The entire floor had gone quiet. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on my back as I walked to my office for the last time. I didn't pack much. A photo of my daughter, who was away at college, a vintage fountain pen, and the single book of poetry I kept in my drawer. Maya appeared at my side. Her hands were shaking as she reached for a box to help me. "They can't do this," she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage I wasn't allowed to show. "Elias, the system, it's yours. It's you. Without the encryption keys." "Quiet," I murmured. Not harsh. Protective. I caught her wrist. Just a light touch, but it stopped her instantly. Her skin was fever hot. She looked up at me, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. She was ready to march into that boardroom and scream until her throat bled. That loyalty, it hit me harder than the firing itself. "Don't make a scene, Maya," I said, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Help me carry this to the elevator." "That's an order." She swallowed hard, nodded, and grabbed the box. We walked to the elevator banks in silence. I pressed the button. The doors slid open with a cheerful ding that felt like an insult. We stepped inside. As the steel doors slid shut, sealing us off from the sharks and the fluorescent lights, the atmosphere changed instantly. The air in the small metal cabin became thick. Heavy. Maya dropped the box to the floor and spun toward me. "Tell me you have a plan," she pleaded, her voice breaking. She stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way no one else dared. "Tell me you aren't just letting them win." I looked down at her. In the reflection of the brushed steel doors, we looked like a paradox. The graying, stoic man in the suit, and the vibrant, furious young woman ready to burn the world down for him. I didn't step back. I let the tension build. Let the silence stretch until I could hear the rapid thudding of her heart. "Maya," I said. My voice was different now. The boss was gone. The man remained. I leaned in. The distance between us closed to inches. I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. I could smell the vanilla scent of her hair, overpowering the metallic smell of the elevator. "They think they bought a machine," I whispered, the words rumbling deep in my chest. "They don't know I kept the ignition key." Her breath hitched. She searched my face, her anger melting into something softer, darker. A realization. "What do I do?" she whispered back. The air between our lips felt charged, electric. I reached out, my hand hovering near her cheek before I let my thumb graze her jawline. "Promise. You go back to your desk," I said. "You keep your head down. And you wait for my signal." The elevator dinged. Ground floor. The doors began to open, breaking the spell. But for 1 second longer, neither of us moved. "When it crashes," I added, stepping back into the lobby, "don't panic. Just answer the phone. There is a specific kind of silence that money can't buy. It has to be built year after year." My living room was dark, save for the amber glow of the streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked glass and the singular warm lamp on my side table. I poured a glass of scotch, single malt, older than the executives who had fired me, and listened to the ice settle. It was 10 p.m. By my calculations, the primary servers at the office would be overheating right about now. The cooling protocols were linked to my biometric ID. Without me, the system would panic. It would start shutting down non-essential functions to save itself. I wasn't angry. I was peaceful. I took a slow sip of the scotch, feeling the burn in my chest, and waited. A phone vibrates against a wooden table. A deep, sustained buzz. I didn't pick it up immediately. I watched the screen light up the dark room. "Maya." I slid my thumb across the glass and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just listened. "It's a bloodbath, Elias," she whispered. She sounded breathless, like she had been running. "The dashboards are all red. Sterling is screaming at IT, but they can't get in. The encryption, It keeps asking for a voice key. I smiled, a ghost of an expression in the dark. And what are you doing? Hiding, she admitted. I could hear the tremble in her voice. I'm in the archive room. Elias, they're talking about legal action. They're saying you sabotaged it. I didn't sabotage anything, I said, my voice dropping to that low, resonant register I saved just for her. I built a house that only recognizes its master. It's not my fault they evicted the owner. I leaned back into the leather armchair, closing my eyes. Even over the digital connection, I could feel her anxiety. It radiated through the phone. I imagined her sitting on the cold floor of the archive room, knees pulled to her chest, that oversized coat wrapped around her like armor. Maya, I said. Breathe. The line went silent for a second. Then a shaky exhale. I'm scared, Elias. If they find out I'm talking to you. They won't, I assured her. But you need to listen to me carefully. The system is going to lock down completely by midnight. When it does, the panic will turn into desperation. That is when we move. We? She asked. The word hung in the air, fragile and hopeful. We, I confirmed. The distance between the office and my home was 5 miles, but in that moment, it felt like she was sitting right there on the rug in front of me. I could hear the background noise of the office, shouting, phones ringing, but it sounded far away. The only real thing was her breathing and the jazz playing softly in my room. Go home, Maya, I murmured. Pack a bag. Just the essentials. And bring the portable drive I gave you last week. Do not plug it in. Just bring it. To your house. She hesitated. It wasn't fear of me. It was the weight of the line we were about to cross. To my house, I said firmly. The storm is coming, kid. And I want you where it's dry. I hung up. The screen went black. The room returned to silence. I took another sip of scotch and watched the rain run down the window. The game had officially begun. But for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't playing for the company. I was playing for the girl who was brave enough to call me when the world was burning. The storm wasn't just in the servers anymore. Outside, the wind was howling, rattling the oak trees that lined my driveway. I stood by the window watching headlights cut through the downpour. When the doorbell finally rang, it sounded jarring in the quiet house. I opened the door, and the cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and ozone. And there she was. Maya. She looked small. That was my first thought. In the office she was sharp, quick, armored in blazers and heels. Here on my doorstep she was shivering. Her coat was soaked through, dark patches clinging to her shoulders. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, and she was clutching her bag to her chest like it held the nuclear codes. Which, in a way, it did. Come in, I said. My voice wasn't the CTO's voice. It was lower, gentler. She stepped over the threshold, and I closed the door, shutting out the world. The silence of the house wrapped around us immediately. She stood in the hallway, dripping water onto the hardwood, looking around with wide, anxious eyes. Then she looked at me. And she stopped. I wasn't wearing the suit. I wasn't wearing the tie or the cufflinks. I was in a charcoal wool sweater and jeans. I saw her gaze travel from my face to the sweater, then back up. It was a look of disorientation, like she was meeting me for the first time. I brought the drive, she stammered, her teeth chattering slightly. I didn't know if I was followed. Forget the drive, I murmured. I walked past her to the hallway closet and pulled out a thick white towel. I moved back into her space. I didn't hand it to her. Instead, I stepped behind her and draped it over her shoulders, pulling the ends together in front of her to trap the heat. My hands lingered on her shoulders for a second too long. Through the damp wool of her coat, I could feel the tension in her muscles. I could feel the heat of her body radiating against my palms. You're freezing, I said, my voice right by her ear. She didn't move away. She leaned back just an inch, almost imperceptibly, into my touch. It's warm in here, she whispered. It smells like you. The air between us shifted. It was no longer about the company or the code or the betrayal. It was just a man and a woman standing in a dimly lit hallway while the rain hammered against the walls. I stepped around to face her. Her hands were gripping the towel, her knuckles white. A wet strand of dark hair was stuck to her forehead, right between her eyes. Without thinking, or perhaps thinking about nothing else, I reached out. I brushed the hair away from her face, my fingers grazing her temple. Her skin was cold from the rain, but her cheek flushed under my touch. She stopped breathing. I stopped breathing. My thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, a slow, deliberate movement that felt louder than any shout. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, wide and vulnerable. In the office, I was her mentor, her boss. But here I was just a man who wanted to keep her warm. Come by the fire, I said, my voice rough. I pulled my hand away slowly, though every instinct in my body told me to keep it there. I'll pour you a drink. Then we end this. She nodded, mute, and followed me into the living room. As she walked, she pulled the towel tighter around herself, not because she was cold anymore, but because she was trying to hold on to the feeling of my hands on her shoulders. We sat on the leather sofa, the cushion sinking under our combined weight. The only light in the room came from the laptop screen sitting on the coffee table. It bathed us in a harsh, rhythmic red glow. Error 404. Critical failure. System purge imminent. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. The architecture I had spent 10 years building was tearing itself apart, line by line, searching for the one master key that had been escorted out of the building at noon. Maya was sitting close. Too close for a colleague, but exactly close enough for a co-conspirator. Her knees were pulled up, grazing the fabric of my jeans. She was watching the screen with a mixture of horror and awe, her lips slightly parted. The shrill, mechanical ring of an old landline telephone slices through the air. She jumped. That's them, she whispered, looking at the dusty phone on the side table. Sterling. The board. They know you're the only one who can stop this. I didn't move. I watched the red text scroll faster. The phone rang again. And again. A desperate, pleading sound. Aren't you going to answer? She asked, turning to me. I looked at her. In the red light, her features looked sharper, wilder. The terrified girl from the hallway was gone. In her place was someone watching an empire fall, and wondering if she should enjoy the view. I could answer, I said calmly. My voice was low, vibrating in the quiet space between us. I could pick up that phone, give them the overriding code, and save them millions of dollars in the next 10 minutes. They'd probably even give me my job back. I saw her throat bob as she swallowed. She looked at the phone, then back at me. Is that what you want? She asked softly. I leaned in. The world outside this room didn't matter. The lawsuit threats, the severance packages, the corporate politics, it was all noise. The only signal that mattered was right here. I want to know what you want, Maya, I replied. You saw how they treated us. You saw them discard people like batteries. If I save it, nothing changes. If I let it crash, we start over. But we start over with nothing. The phone rang one last time, a long piercing trill. Maya reached out. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. She didn't reach for the phone. She reached for my hand, her fingers sliding between mine, gripping tight. Her skin was warm now. Let it crash, she whispered. The permission was intoxicating. I didn't look back at the screen. I kept my eyes locked on hers as I reached over with my free hand, found the cord to the landline, and yanked it from the wall. The ringing stopped instantly. On the screen, the scrolling text froze for a heartbeat. Then the screen went black. System offline. The silence that followed was absolute. No hum of servers. No ringing phones. Just the sound of the rain outside and the heavy, synchronized rhythm of our breathing. We were alone in the dark, my hand still laced with hers. We had just caused a catastrophe that would be on the morning news. We should have been terrified. But as I looked at her, watching the firelight dance in her eyes, I didn't feel fear. I felt an exhilarating, terrifying freedom. And I knew by the way she squeezed my hand that she felt it too. It's done, I murmured. She didn't pull her hand away. So what happens now? Now, I said, shifting so I was facing her fully, the leather creaking beneath us. Now we watch them panic. And we figure out what we're going to build from the ashes. I woke up to something I hadn't heard in 20 years. Silence. Not the terrified silence of a crashing server, and not the lonely silence of an empty house. It was the silence of peace. The storm had broken sometime around 4 a.m., leaving the sky a washed-out, brilliant blue. I walked out of the bedroom, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The knot of tension that usually lived between my shoulder blades The weight of the company, the board, the code was gone. I felt lighter. Younger. I followed the smell of coffee down the hallway. Maya was in the kitchen. She was standing by the island, staring out the window at the wet garden. She had discarded the blazer. She was wearing her white blouse with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, holding one of my mugs with both hands. She looked tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that comes after you've survived something impossible. "You're up," she said, turning around as I entered. A small shy smile played on her lips. It was different from her office smile. It wasn't polite. It was real. "The phone started ringing again at 6, she said, gesturing to the mobile I had left on the counter. I silenced it, but I saw the notifications. "Sterling is begging for a meeting. They're offering a consulting fee that's obscenely high." I walked over to the coffee pot and poured myself a cup. The steam rose up, catching the morning light. "Let them wait," I said. "They can sweat for another hour." I leaned against the counter, facing her. The distance between us was small. Domestic. "You realize what we did, don't you?" I asked quietly. "We didn't just crash a system, Maya. We burned a bridge. There is no going back to that office. Not for me, and probably not for you." She looked down into her coffee, the dark liquid swirling as she tilted the mug. "I don't want to go back," she admitted softly. "I never liked the view from the 42nd floor anyway. It was too cold." She looked up, her brown eyes locking onto mine. "What about you, Elias? Are you going to take their money? Fix the code?" I looked at her. I took in the messy bun, the ink smudge on her wrist, the fierce intelligence behind her gaze. I realized then that the Elias protocol wasn't the most valuable thing I had found in that building. "I'll fix it," I said, setting my mug down. "I'll take their money. I'll take every dime they offer to patch the hole we made." Her face fell slightly, a flicker of disappointment. "But," I continued, my voice dropping, "I'm not doing it as their employee. I'm doing it as an independent contractor. And I'm not doing it alone." I reached across the granite countertop. I didn't hesitate this time. I placed my hand over hers. Her skin was warm, solid. "I need a partner, Maya. Someone who knows the code. Someone I trust." She stared at my hand covering hers. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her hand over. Her fingers slipped between mine, interlacing. It was a firm grip. An anchor. "I'm expensive," she teased, though her voice was thick with emotion. I squeezed her hand, a thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I know," I whispered. "You're worth it." In the quiet of the kitchen, with the morning sun warming the floorboards, the age gap, the titles, the rules, they all evaporated. We weren't boss and employee anymore. We were just two people who had burned down the old world so we could build a new one together. 6 months ago, I was staring at a wall of gray slate, waiting for a severance check. Today, I'm looking at brick, exposed beams, and sunlight. We found this place a week after the settlement check cleared. It was an old warehouse district, rough around the edges, much like us. We called the firm Architect. Simple. Direct. And in just half a year, we were already turning away clients. I sat at my desk, a slab of reclaimed oak, not glass, and watched Maya across the room. She was on the phone, pacing in front of a whiteboard covered in schematics. She wasn't the terrified girl in the rain anymore. She wasn't the quiet analyst hiding in the archives. She was a force of nature. I watched her command the conversation, her hand gesturing in the air, her voice confident and sharp. She caught me watching her. She didn't look away. She just winked, a quick, playful flicker, and went right back to closing the deal. That was the difference. In the old tower, I was the mentor and she was the student. Here we were equals. My experience gave us the foundation, but her vision built the skyline. The sound of the office quiets down. A door closes, signaling the end of the workday. The sun began to dip, casting long golden shadows across the floorboards. The staff had gone home. It was just us again. The way it was always meant to be. I rubbed my temples, feeling the fatigue of a long week, and leaned back in my chair. I heard her footsteps approaching, light, purposeful. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said softly. I didn't open my eyes. "I'm thinking about the Sterling account. They called again." "I know," she replied. I could feel her presence right behind my chair. I told them we're fully booked until next quarter, and that our rates have gone up. Again. I chuckled, a low rumble in my chest. You're ruthless. I learned from the best. She moved then. She didn't walk around the desk to sit opposite me. Instead, she stepped in close behind my chair. I felt her hands settle on my shoulders. Her touch was grounding, familiar. She began to knead the tension from my neck, her thumbs digging into the tight muscles with a perfect, knowing pressure. It was an intimacy that went beyond romance. It was a silent language of care. I let out a long exhale, my head falling back slightly to rest against her stomach. I could feel the warmth of her through my shirt. We did it, Elias, she whispered. Her voice was right above me, soft as velvet. We actually pulled it off. I reached up, covering one of her hands with mine. I didn't pull her hand away. I just held it there, pressing it against my chest so she could feel the steady rhythm of my heart. They thought they could steal the code, I murmured, opening my eyes to look at the ceiling, imagining her face above me. They didn't realize the code was never the asset. What was the asset? She asked, her fingers threading through mine. I turned my chair slowly, breaking the contact just long enough to face her. She was bathed in the golden hour light, looking at me with that same intensity she had in the elevator, but without the fear. Just love. Deeply rooted, proven love. I reached out, taking her hand and pulling her gently toward me until she was standing between my knees. I looked up at her, knowing that for the rest of my life, this was the only view I wanted. The asset, I said, looking into her eyes, was us. Sometimes you have to let the old world crash before you can build the life you actually want. Elias and Maya took the leap. But I want to know about you. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor. Leave a fire emoji in the comments to let me know you made it to the end. And tell me, if you could walk away from everything today to start over with someone you love, where would you go? I'll be reading through the comments tonight. Until next time, stay safe and keep your standards high.